My name is Grace Whitaker. I am 71 years old, and for most of my life, I worked as a librarian. I spent decades surrounded by quiet shelves and stories that taught me how to watch people, how to notice the small things, and how silence can tell the loudest truth. I never imagined that one day I would need every bit of that wisdom just to survive my own family. I came home that evening with a secret tucked inside a simple blue folio, a secret I was excited to share. My brother Victor had passed away a year ago, and after long legal delays, his inheritance was finally released. I had not told my son or my daughter-in-law yet. I wanted the moment to be special. 3 rental apartments in Pittsburgh and a little beach house called Gull's Haven on the Maine coast. Enough to give my son, Daniel, a fresh start. Enough to make life easier for all of us. I was eager, but then I reached my front door. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. What would you do if you arrived home ready to give your family everything, only to discover they had been planning to take it from you first? Stay with me, because what happened next changed my life forever. The door stood open just an inch. Light spilled from the living room. I heard voices. At first, I smiled, thinking they were planning a surprise for me. I leaned in, ready to call out my hello. But then Sloane's voice cut through the air, sharp like the edge of a paper. "She will not last long anyway." A few seconds of silence followed, each one slicing deeper than the last. My fingers tightened around the doorknob. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I held my breath. Daniel's voice answered, softer, uncertain. "I just want to make sure Mom is taken care of." "Oh, please," Sloane said. "Once we get the guardianship paperwork through, we sell this house for $300,000, move her into assisted living, and that monthly fee will practically pay itself. $2,400 a month is nothing when we split the rest." My knees felt weak. My cheerful news dissolved into ice. They were talking about my home like it was already theirs, as if I were already gone. I pressed my palm against the wood, steadying myself. There was more. "And the apartments?" Daniel asked quietly. "What if she says no?" "She will not even know," Sloane replied. "We will get that medical form signed this week. She has been forgetting things. We just have to encourage it a little. Soon, she will have no say in any of it." For a moment, I could not even cry. My throat closed. My mind raced through every tiny moment from the past months. The changed coffee brand that tasted too bitter. The new pill she insisted I try for my sleep. The way she kept calling me confused, clumsy, forgetful. Gaslighting so perfectly wrapped in the tone of concern. All this time, I thought I was being unfair to her. I thought I was too sensitive, too defensive. I thought I was imagining it. I was not. I carefully placed the blue folio back into my purse, hiding it as though it were a beating heart I needed to protect. I straightened my posture. I took one long breath, and then I pushed the door open wider, wearing the calmest expression I could find. "Hello?" I said. They jumped in their seats. Sloane was the first to recover, smiling with lips that did not touch her eyes. "Grace? You are home early. We were just talking about dinner plans." "Oh," I answered, setting my purse down by the coat rack. "I thought I heard something important, but maybe I was mistaken." Sloane stood and hurried to the kitchen. "Let me make you some of that relaxing tea you like." Of course she would. Of course. Daniel stayed on the couch, wringing his hands, avoiding my gaze. My son, the boy whose artwork still hung on the refrigerator, faded but precious. The man now sitting in front of me, letting someone else think for him. I wanted to ask him why he would do this to me. But instead, I smiled and folded my cardigan over the back of the chair as though nothing in the world had changed. That night, I pretended to read a book while they whispered in the hallway. I caught bits of words. Form. Monday. Evaluation. They thought I was fragile now. Easy to corner, easy to erase. I turned the page without seeing a single letter. My hands were cold, but inside, something fierce began to burn. I was not ready to surrender my life to anyone, least of all to people who wanted me gone. When I went to bed, I stared into the darkness for a long while. I did not sleep. I planned. I held the blue folio close to my chest under the blanket, feeling the crisp paper edges against my skin. Proof that my life was worth far more than their greed allowed. In the silence, I asked myself the question that would change everything. What if I say nothing? What if I let them believe I am the fool they think I am? What if I fight without them ever seeing the punch coming? The idea gave me strength. I finally closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would act completely normal. I would smile. I would thank them for their help. I would give them no reason to rush. Let them think I was small. Because the moment I heard those words behind the door, my life changed. And I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This story was no longer about giving my son a fresh start. I would not disappear. It was about saving myself. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I lay still for a moment, letting the quiet settle over me like a protective blanket. I needed to move carefully. Every breath, every glance had to appear harmless. They thought I was slipping, so I would give them a version of that story, just enough to keep them blind to what I was really seeing. When I stepped into the kitchen, Sloane was already there, moving with that crisp efficiency she pretended was love. She poured a cup of herbal tea and pushed it toward me. "To help calm your nerves," she said, the same rehearsed warmth in her voice. I wrapped my hands around the cup, feeling the heat against my palms. I raised it halfway to my lips, then set it down. "Maybe later," I said gently. "My stomach is a little off this morning." I smiled. She frowned. She had already rearranged the kitchen. Spices moved. Labels turned away. My favorite mug stored too high for me to reach. It was only my second morning noticing these subtle shifts. How many months had she been reshaping my life piece by piece, claiming she was helping? I suddenly understood. She had been preparing this takeover for a long time. Daniel entered the kitchen next, his footsteps heavy, his eyes tired. He kissed the top of my head like he used to when he was a thoughtful boy. "Morning, Mom," he said softly. "Morning," I replied. I reached out and squeezed his hand. He did not squeeze back. Small details revealed the biggest truths. I told them I planned to stay home and rest. They exchanged a glance. Sloane pulled out her phone, pretending to scroll casually, but I caught a glimpse of an app with location permissions displayed, something that monitored my steps. My life reduced to coordinates on her screen. Later that day, she placed a stack of papers in front of me. "These are just for your health," she assured. "Standard updates. You know how the system is with older people." She tapped where she wanted me to sign, filling the room with sugary concern. I pretended to squint. "I will look at them tonight," I said. She masked irritation with a smile too bright, a smile that warned me I was stepping outside her script. After lunch, I went upstairs. My hands trembled as I dug through the mail drawer. There, hidden under junk flyers, I found the envelope from the bank. It confirmed a new cosigner had been added to my checking account. Me and Daniel. Or maybe not me at all. My signature looked traced, tentative. I felt a burn climb up my throat. I folded the document and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. When I came back down, my bookshelf was empty. Every novel, every journal, Every memory contained in those pages was gone. In their place stood small decorative boxes, labeled like storage containers in a museum exhibit. My life, sanitized. "Where are my books?" I asked it. Sloane waved a dismissive hand. "They were old. I donated them. You barely read anymore." Barely read? The insult punched right through me, but I swallowed the hurt and nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. She believed the lie. I could feel the victory of silence forming its own quiet strength inside me. Later in the afternoon, I pretended to nap. When the house felt still, I slipped out to the side porch and dialed the only person I could trust, Linda at the bank. "I did not authorize changes to my account," I whispered. She paused. Then she told me she had flagged the transaction because something fell off. She could not say more without a formal complaint, but her voice lowered. "I know when someone is being cornered," she said. Her words wrapped around me like armor. I thanked her and hung up, just moments before Daniel opened the door. He looked guilty, like a child caught sneaking cookies. "Mom," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Sloane is helping us. I mean, helping you." I took his hand again. "Are you helping me too?" I asked. He stared at the steps. "Of course." But his voice cracked. That small fracture in his certainty gave me hope. That night, Sloane insisted on making me the tea again. I held the cup. I waited until she turned away. Then I dumped the steaming liquid into the sink, rinsing the mug quickly. When she came back, I smiled and yawned as though the herbs had worked their magic. Before bed, I checked the cabinet where the supplements were stored. A small amber bottle caught my eye. The label read melatonin. But the pills were white, not the soft beige I knew. I took a photo with my phone, making sure to include the barcode and the edge of the kitchen counter. Evidence. I returned to my room and opened the wardrobe. A little metal tin lay hidden behind a stack of scarves. Inside were old photos of Daniel. One showed him at 5 years old, grinning proudly at his first day of school. Another showed him holding a certificate with a gold star sticker, his smile blazing like he believed the world adored him. I laid the photos on the bed and studied them. I remembered the way he used to run into my arms after school, smelling of glue sticks and laughter. He loved me once, maybe still did, deep down under the weight of fear and debt. The house quieted. I heard soft footsteps in the hall, then the slow creak of my doorknob turning. I closed my eyes and regulated my breathing, pretending deep, peaceful sleep. The door cracked open. A shadow hovered, watching, checking, measuring how much longer I would last. I let my body stay still. No reaction. Let them believe I was slipping further. When the door clicked shut, I opened my eyes again. I sat up and listened to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint murmur of Sloane's voice downstairs, likely planning her next move. My heart beat slow, steady. I was learning the rhythm of their scheme, learning where I could fit my escape. The blue folio was still tucked beneath my pillow. I brushed my fingers against it and promised myself I would protect every page. Tomorrow would be the beginning of my own plan. They thought they were closing in on me, but they had no idea that I had already begun to slip through their grasp. They believed I would fade away quietly. They believed I would cooperate with my undoing. They believed I was done. But they were wrong. I was only beginning. I woke with a strange kind of calm the next morning. Fear had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. It no longer felt like something chasing me. It felt like something I could use, like a warning bell telling me to stop hoping this nightmare would fix itself. I needed to act. After breakfast, I told Sloane I wanted to spend time organizing old mail. She waved me off, too busy rearranging another piece of my life. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and reached under the mattress. The blue folio was where I left it. For a long moment, I just held it in my lap, my fingertips brushing its worn edges. That folio contained everything they thought I did not know, everything they were already trying to control. I opened it slowly. There on the top was a letter in Victor's handwriting, neat and sharp as always. My throat tightened as I unfolded the pages. I could almost hear his voice. Grace, if you are reading this, it means the estate has finally cleared. I know how Daniel worships Sloane's confidence, but she sees people as stepping stones. Promise me you will not tell her where the assets are until you choose the right moment. Not everyone who smiles cares for your well-being. I have taken precautions. Trust Martin Reyes. He is already prepared. I paused, letting the inked words sink into my heart. My brother had known. He had recognized danger in the distance long before it reached my door. He had been planning to protect me even after death. I wiped the corner of my eye and kept reading. There are rental payments that will begin next week. Do not let anyone rush you into decisions, not even Daniel. Your voice matters. You are stronger than you think. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the bed beside me. For months, I had felt like I was unraveling. Now I realized someone had woven a safety net beneath me long ago. Under the letter was a set of keys on an old metal ring. One key was marked with small stamped letters, V.H. Victor Hale. I traced those initials with my thumb, feeling a jolt of purpose. There was also a small antique radio, one Victor had loved as a teenager. I turned the dial absent-mindedly. Static crackled, then a soft click. Suddenly, his voice emerged, warm and familiar. He had recorded something. If you ever doubt yourself, he said, remember that you survived every storm life threw at you. I believe in you, Gracie. I pressed the radio to my chest. I felt like someone was standing behind me, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder. The last document in the folio listed the assets, 3 apartments already rented, bringing in over $5,000 a month, and a property called Gull's Haven overlooking the ocean. I could picture the wind brushing through tall grass near the cliffs, the salt on my lips, freedom stretching like the horizon, a place no one could reach me. The sound of footsteps snapped me back. I quickly tucked everything away and opened a random drawer to pretend I was sorting old scarves. My heart thudded as the doorknob rattled. Grace? Sloane peeked inside. I was just checking if you needed help. You seem so overwhelmed lately. She smiled like a nurse in a bad hospital commercial. Something in her eyes told me she noticed my pulse racing. I forced a laugh and waved her off. I'm just moving slow today. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. I had to move carefully. To fight a predator, you do not roar. You stalk quietly. You watch. You wait. I slipped into the bathroom, turned on the shower for sound, and called the number written at the bottom of Victor's letter. A deep voice answered. This is Martin. My name is Grace Whitaker, I whispered. Victor Hale was my brother. A rustle of papers, a soft exhale. Then his tone changed, steady and focused. Grace, I have been waiting for this call. I told him everything in a voice barely louder than running water, the conversations behind the door, the rearranged house, the suspicious tea, the papers Sloane tried to make me sign. Martin asked precise questions. He did not sound surprised. That frightened me more than anything. We need to create a record, he said. Everything you see, everything you hear, you write it down. times, dates, context. I will help you, but we cannot alert them too soon. When the moment is right, we will stop this completely. I nodded, clutching the phone. I can do that. Good, he replied. And Grace, you are not alone in this. After the call, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote 2 words in firm, unwavering letters. Defense ledger. Then I began to document the truth. Each detail an act of defiance, each line a step toward my own salvation. I felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself they had tried to erase. That afternoon, I made a simple sandwich and took it to the backyard. The sun warmed my skin as I listened to the wind rustle the leaves. I pretended to enjoy the fresh air. Daniel glanced out the kitchen window, worried I might wander off like a confused patient. He came out and sat beside me, quiet for a moment. "Mom?" he finally said. "Things have been stressful. Sloan she wants what's best." "What do you want?" I asked gently. He swallowed. "I want us all to be okay. I made some bad decisions. I owe some people money. Sloan thinks we just need a new plan." I watched him carefully. He was drowning, and instead of reaching for my hand, he reached for my life. "I believe you can still make things right," I said. His eyes lifted at that, hopeful for a second before fear swallowed it again. That night, after they went to bed, I locked my bedroom door and pulled out the radio again. I played Victor's voice once more, letting it strengthen my resolve. "You survived every storm," he said. "You can survive this too." I set the radio down and opened the defense ledger. My pen moved steadily, line by line, carving proof into the page. They wanted me silent. They wanted me compliant. But they had underestimated the woman who spent a lifetime teaching others how powerful knowledge can be. As the moonlight pressed through the curtains, something changed inside me. Fear stepped aside, and something stronger took its place. I was not waiting for rescue anymore. I was building the road out myself. And soon, I would walk it. I woke early again, long before the house stirred. I lay there in the faint blue light of dawn, listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a warning. I rolled out of bed, grabbed the defense ledger from the nightstand, and flipped to a fresh page. Yesterday's entries sat above in clean, stark lines. The app on my phone tracking my steps. The strange pills in the kitchen. The forged signature on my bank account. Today, I would add more. I wrote the date at the top of the page and underlined it. Then I slipped the notebook into my cardigan pocket, along with my phone and the soft clicking antique radio. Nothing in this house felt safe anymore. The walls had ears, and I had learned to speak through my actions. Downstairs, I pretended to make coffee while watching Sloane's reflection move in the hallway mirror. She checked her watch at least 3 times before stepping into the room with brisk confidence. "Grace, you have an appointment this afternoon. Just a quick wellness check. Nothing to worry about." She said it like a dentist reminding a child about a routine cleaning. I raised my eyebrows, keeping my voice light. "A wellness check?" "For your own peace of mind," she replied, sliding the mug closer to me. "We want you to feel supported." Supported. Controlled. The same word with 2 different maps underneath. I pretended to forget about the tea yesterday and took a sip of coffee instead. Bitter. Too bitter. I saw her watching, waiting, measuring how much longer until the pieces fell exactly where she wanted. I thanked her and went upstairs, making sure to move slowly, leaving her with the illusion of success. In my room, I retrieved the metal tin of Daniel's old photos. I tucked one particular picture into the ledger. Daniel holding a small trophy, his face beaming with pride. Once, he believed in himself, before weakness found him, before someone else found his weakness. Today, I needed help from someone who still cared. I walked the 2 blocks to a payphone I remembered from years ago near the bus stop. Cold autumn air brushed against my cheeks. I lifted the receiver, breathing hard from both the pace and the weight of what I was doing. The number Martin had given me connected after 2 short rings. "This is Rhea's Law." "It's Grace," I whispered. "Good," he said, calm, steady, someone who carried certainty like other people carried keys. "I need you to take a taxi to my office tomorrow morning. And Grace, do not let them know you are leaving the house." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I can handle that." Before hanging up, he added, "By the end of next week, everything will be out of their reach. But we must move fast. They may escalate." Escalate. The word knotted in my stomach. I hung up and stepped away quickly. No one saw me. That alone felt like a victory. On the walk home, I stopped at the corner store to buy adhesive tabs. Back in my room, I labeled them by color and stuck them next to each entry in the defense ledger: medical manipulation, financial interference, environmental control. I left space beneath each heading. More details would come. Miguel, the handyman who came on Thursdays, arrived to fix a loose cabinet hinge. I had always liked Miguel, a quiet man with kind eyes. As he passed me in the kitchen, his gaze flicked toward the tea satchel near the stove. He frowned. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked, lowering his voice. I hesitated. Then I opened the cabinet and pointed to the bottle labeled as melatonin. He took it from the shelf, turning it in his hand. "These pills, they don't look right." He snapped a quick photo with his phone. "I didn't take any," I whispered. His face softened with relief. "Keep that bottle where they think it is. It might be important." I wrote in my ledger, "Miguel suspects medication tampering. Photo documentation exists." Before he left, he paused at the doorway. "If you ever feel unsafe, you call me," he said gently. That simple offer put warmth back into my bones. Later that day, Daniel came home early. He looked like he had been crying. He hovered near the living room doorway, hands buried deep in his pockets. "Mom," he began, pausing as if gathering pieces of himself. "Sloan thinks you should let us manage your finances, just while things calm down." I laid down my knitting and looked up at him with soft eyes. "Do you think I am incapable of deciding what is best for me?" He flinched. "No, I'd feel better knowing everything is organized." "You mean Sloan would feel better?" He did not deny it. His shoulders fell a little lower. I reached for his trembling hand. "Daniel, I am not your burden, and I am not in your way." He pulled back as though my touch burned. "I can't talk about this." He left the room, closing the door harder than he meant to. He was a trapped man, clutching at whatever escape his fear offered. The house grew colder after that. When evening came, Sloan hovered near the front door, checking her phone repeatedly. I heard her whisper to someone, "Yes, the exam is scheduled in 48 hours. Once she signs, we are done." I recorded the time and phrasing immediately in the ledger, hands steady despite the thunder in my chest. That night, after they went upstairs, I collected what I needed: the blue folio, the defense ledger, my ID, a burner phone Martin insisted I acquire, and a key ring with the small VH metal tag. I slipped my wedding ring from my finger and placed it next to the radio. a gift from a woman I once was, waiting for the woman I was becoming. Then I opened my window quietly, slipping the burner phone into my coat and easing myself down the back porch steps. The boards creaked softly, but no one stirred. I walked down the street until I reached a parked taxi Martin arranged. The driver nodded as though he had been expecting me all along. By the time the sun rose again, I would be somewhere safer. Somewhere they would never think to look. Somewhere I could breathe. Before stepping into the cab, I looked back at the dark silhouette of the house I had built a life in. For years, it had been a place of warmth. Now it held only shadows. "I am not done," I whispered. My breath made a small cloud in the cold air. "You will not take my life from me." I climbed into the taxi. The door shut with a quiet, decisive click. As we pulled away, the streetlights blurred into golden streaks through the window. My pulse steadied. My mind sharpened. This was the first move in a battle they never saw coming. I turned on Victor's radio just long enough to hear his voice again. "You are stronger than you think." I smiled into the darkness. He was right. I would fight not by shouting. I would fight by surviving. And tomorrow would be the beginning of everything I was meant to take back. The taxi drove through quiet neighborhoods, still wrapped in darkness. Each street lamp flickered through the window, a steady pulse reminding me that I was still moving, still alive, still choosing my next breath. I kept my hand firmly over the blue folio in my lap. It felt like the only heartbeat I could trust. When we pulled into the motel parking lot, the driver helped me with my small bag. He did not ask questions. That made me trust him a little. The air smelled like damp asphalt and pine from the trees lining the road, a place no one who claimed to love me would think to search. Once inside the room, I double-locked the door and leaned against it, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. I was safe. For now. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my bag, laying out the things that truly mattered. My ID, the defense ledger, the radio, the key with VH etched into the metal. I touched each object like a soldier counting weapons before battle. They were more than survival tools. They were pieces of my identity the world had tried to prune away. The clock on the bedside table read 4:11 a.m. I had been awake nearly 24 hours, but my mind raced too fast for sleep. Daniel's face flashed in my thoughts. The boy who used to collect seashells with me at the beach house. The man who once hugged me so tightly at his wedding that he lifted me off the ground. My son. And yet, he had let someone carve me out of the future like I was clutter to be cleared. I pressed the photo of him with his little trophy against my heart. I needed the reminder that he had goodness in him once, that he could find his way back. I had to believe that. A vibration startled me. I grabbed the burner phone from the nightstand. A message from Martin appeared. "Call me when you wake." I dialed. "You made it out," he said immediately. Relief softened his usually controlled voice. "Yes," I whispered. "They didn't notice." "Good. Keep it that way. We will secure every piece of your estate before they even understand what happened." There was a pause before he added, "You did the right thing leaving. They were accelerating." Accelerating. I swallowed hard. Sloane scheduled some sort of appointment. She said it was a wellness check. "I already requested your voluntary evaluation through the police department," he replied. "Which means any attempt they make to declare incompetence will be blocked. We are ahead of them." My breath came a little easier. "Thank you, Martin." "We are not done," he corrected gently. "But today we'll set the foundation. Rest for a few hours. I will pick you up at noon. We have documents to finalize. Then we move forward." I hung up, letting his confidence steady me. I set the phone down and finally allowed myself to lie back, the motel sheets cool against my skin. Sleep came like a sudden drop. When I woke, sunlight streamed through thin curtains, painting sharp lines across the room. I stretched, feeling a faint ache beneath my ribs. The cost of tension kept too long. I showered, dressed in clean clothes, and sat with the radio while waiting. I turned the dial. Victor's voice drifted into the air, soft and unwavering. "You survived every storm." My favorite line. The line that made me believe not all strength has to roar. At exactly noon, 3 knocks sounded at the door. I peered through the peephole. Martin stood there in a dark suit, posture straight, a briefcase in hand. A man who walked into every room prepared to win. I opened the door and he stepped inside with quiet efficiency. "Let's go. We have a lot to accomplish." Outside, he drove a plain gray sedan. Discreet, sensible. We traveled in silence for a while until he said, "They will likely realize you are gone within the next few hours. They might try to report you missing or incapacitated. We must stay ahead of their narrative." "That is why I left now," I replied. "I heard them. They were planning something with medication." Something sharp flickered in his eyes. "Do you still have the bottle?" "I left it exactly where they expected it." I lifted the ledger. "But I have evidence." The edges of his mouth curved into something close to pride. "Excellent." We reached the state office first. Paperwork, stamps, official seals pressed into thick pages, transferring the assets to a secure trust structure with me as the sole authority. My signature flowed across each line like it was a declaration of existence. From there, we went to a new bank. Linda met us privately in a small office. Her firm handshake told me she knew exactly how much this mattered. "I reviewed every recent transaction on your accounts," she said. "I will provide a signed statement confirming the irregularities and the attempted unauthorized changes." "Thank you," was all I could manage. Gratitude made my voice wobble. We left with new accounts, new cards, and a layer of protection that Sloan could no longer penetrate. Afterward, Martin drove us to a quiet diner. Over late lunch, my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Daniel. I stared at the screen. "Let it ring," Martin advised gently. The call went to voicemail, but a message appeared a few seconds later. "Mom, where are you? Call me." I looked down at the defense ledger resting on the seat beside me. Without speaking, I reached for my pen. I wrote the time of the call. I wrote the words "concern after absence noted." But concern was too generous. Panic was more like it. They had lost sight of their target. We finished eating. Outside, a cool breeze swept through the parking lot. I stood for a moment, letting my lungs fill with air that did not belong to that house. Air that tasted like possibility. "Where now?" I asked it. "Temporary lodging," he said. "Until we secure the rest of your protections. Then you decide where home will be." I nodded. I knew exactly where home would be. A place with waves and wind and Victor's ghost watching over me. As Martin drove, my phone buzzed again. This time, from Sloan. "You're confused. We are trying to help you. Come home." The message felt like a net she was still trying to throw over me. But the net had holes now, and I had already slipped through. I turned my face toward the window, watching the scenery blur past. My reflection stared back at me, older than I wanted, but stronger than I remembered. For the first time in a long time, I saw a woman who refused to be erased. Tonight, I would sleep somewhere they could not reach me. Tomorrow, I would be closer to the ocean. And soon, I would stand on the shore of my brother's final gift. Freedom. I woke in a new bed the next morning. this time in a quiet rental apartment that Martin arranged under my name only. The sun spilled through sheer curtains, catching dust like glitter in the air. It felt strange to see light without dread attached to it. I sat up slowly, grounding myself in the truth. I was free from that house. Not free from danger, but free to fight. Martin arrived with coffee and a folder of documents just after 9. He placed everything neatly on the dining table. "Today," he said, "we build the paper wall that keeps them out." He always spoke with certainty, like everything was already under control. It helped me breathe. He slid a document toward me. "First, your assets are now protected under a trust. Only you have authority. Second, we file a voluntary request with the district police confirming your autonomy and well-being. That blocks any attempt to claim you are missing or mentally impaired. And third, we secure a restraining order based on attempted financial coercion." I nodded slowly. Each decision was a brick in the wall between me and their scheme. After yesterday, I no longer doubted how necessary it was. The doorbell rang. Martin stepped forward, checking through the peephole before opening the door. A woman with a crisp navy blazer and a badge clipped to her belt entered. She introduced herself as Sergeant Naomi Brooks. Her presence filled the room like a shield. "I've been briefed about the situation, Mrs. Whitaker," she said. "We take elder exploitation very seriously." She handed me a form. "This is your voluntary declaration of safety. By signing, you confirm you left the residence of your own free will. You feel secure, and no one has the authority to make decisions for you without your consent." My hand hovered over the line for a moment. Signing meant declaring independence from my own child. It meant acknowledging that I was no longer safe in the home I built with him. The pen tip pressed into the paper and the ink flowed. My heart ached, but my spine felt stronger. Naomi nodded with a firm, approving expression. "If anyone tries to report you missing or mentally unstable, we will call you first. You are in control." Control, a word that had been slipping through my fingers for months. Now I held it again. Before leaving, Naomi lowered her voice. "Be cautious. People who attempt to control others financially don't always stop when their first plan fails." She was gone a moment later, but her warning lingered. We moved next to the bank. Linda welcomed us through a side entrance to avoid curious eyes. She handed me an affidavit, 3 pages documenting the suspicious attempt to alter my account. "I will testify to this if needed," she said. Some people forget that older women watch the world more closely than they think. I thanked her with a grip of her hand, feeling a shared understanding in the way she squeezed back. Outside in the parking lot, my phone vibrated again. Daniel's name appeared. Then, a second later, Sloane's. I did not answer. Martin glanced at me. "Their panic confirms our timing was right." He gestured toward the car. "One more stop." We drove to the courthouse annex. A clerk notarized everything with quick motions, stamping seals onto paper that suddenly felt like armor. One signature after another, each page pushing Sloane further from my life. While Martin was paying fees at the counter, a call came through from an unfamiliar number. I stepped away to answer cautiously. "Hello?" A woman's voice responded, too cheerful. "Mrs. Whitaker? This is Paula from Sunridge Assisted Living. We were told you're having memory concerns, and we have a room available. We can arrange transportation immediately." Memory concerns. Transportation. The picture was clear. Someone had already begun placing me into a system that existed to swallow people whole. I breathed in slowly, letting my voice stay calm. Thank you, but I have no need for your services. And if anyone asks again, please tell them the police have already confirmed my well-being." She hesitated. The confidence in her tone cracked. "Oh, well, of course." I ended the call before she could recover. Then I recorded the time and details in the defense ledger, another link in the chain of their attempt to erase me. Driving back to the apartment, Martin asked, "Is your son likely involved in these calls?" My throat tightened. "He is scared," I said softly. "Scared people do foolish things." It wasn't an excuse. It was simply the truth I still needed to believe, that Daniel's heart wasn't lost, only buried. At the apartment building, Martin paused before leaving. "I'll file everything today. We are now legally fortified. Let them try anything else. They will be the ones facing consequences." When he was gone, I sat alone for the first time in hours. The room was quiet, but not silent. There was a hum of life around me, a hum I could choose now instead of endure. My phone buzzed again. A message from Daniel lit the screen. "Mom, please. We just want to understand what's happening. Let us help you." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to scream, "You were planning to lock me away." But I did not respond. My protection now depended on their confusion. Silence was my weapon. I turned off the phone and placed it face down. Next to it lay the small silver key marked VH. I held it up to the light, watching the metal glint. Somewhere on the coast, a house waited for me. A house filled with wind and salt, and memories that didn't hurt. But there was one more task before I could go. I flipped open the defense ledger, writing steadily. Met with attorney. Signed voluntary safety declaration. Secured restraining protections. Attempted placement call from Paula. Evidence growing. Each stroke of the pen reminded me I was still here. Still fighting. Still my own. When the final line was finished, I closed the ledger and let my hand rest on its cover. The next days would be crucial. The next move would change everything. I stood at the window, watching leaves swirl across the sidewalk. Freedom tasted like crisp air and paperwork, and the courage not to turn back. For years, I thought quiet was what happened when life slowed down. Now I knew the truth. Quiet is what power sounds like before it makes itself heard. And this newfound quiet, this calm wrapped around my bones, told me something with absolute clarity. I was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, I woke up with the sea on my mind. Not waves I could hear or see yet, but the memory of them. I could almost feel the salt brushing my skin the way it did when Victor and I were children, racing barefoot along the shore of Gull's Haven. That house was waiting for me, a place untouched by manipulation, a place where my thoughts would be entirely my own. Martin arrived before noon with a calm urgency in his step. "We should move you to your brother's beach property today," he said. "Distance will help. It puts jurisdiction questions in your favor and buys us time." He didn't need to explain further. Every mile I traveled away from Sloane's Reach was a mile closer to my own life. We drove north for hours, leaving neighborhoods and highways behind for winding roads lined with pines. The sky grew wider, the air sharper. My heart beat faster with each mile marker. Eventually, the scent of the ocean crept into the car, clean and wild. I cracked the window and inhaled deeply. Freedom had a taste. The driveway to Gull's Haven was narrow, gravel crunching beneath our tires. When the house finally appeared, perched on a bluff overlooking the crashing waves, I felt my knees weaken. Pale gray siding, weathered by storms. windows stretched wide like open arms. This wasn't just a building, it was a refuge built from my brother's love. Inside, dust sheets covered furniture like ghosts resting in the quiet. I walked room to room, lifting the covers. A wooden table scarred with old card games, two armchairs by the picture window facing the water, a shelf still holding Victor's radio collection. I brushed my fingers over one radio in particular, the one from the folio, now sitting solidly in my bag. These reminders of him, scattered like breadcrumbs, kept guiding me forward. Martin opened a closet and retrieved a small envelope taped to the wall. "Victor told me about this," he said with a faint smile. He handed it to me. On the front, my name in his unmistakable handwriting. I tore the seal carefully. Inside was $6,000 in cash and a handwritten note. "For emergencies," it said. "Trust yourself." My eyes stung. Victor always knew which wounds would open, and he always left bandages ready. Martin stepped outside to take a call, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The ocean roared below the bluff, steady and alive. I set the money in a drawer and turned my attention to the old radio. I switched it on, tuning gently, static. Then a faint pop, and Victor's voice again. "You survived every storm," he whispered into the room. "Don't stop now." A knock at the door startled me. I froze. Martin wasn't back yet. But when I opened it, there stood a young woman with a warm smile and a clipboard held close to her chest. "Mrs. Whitaker?" "I'm Tessa Reyes from Senior Shield," she said. "Martin asked me to meet you here. I help older adults stay independent and connected to support systems." She stepped inside and looked around with admiration. "This place is beautiful. The ocean must feel like a friend." I nodded. "It always has." Tessa sat with me at the kitchen table, spreading out forms and explaining each one with clear, respectful language. No trickery, no hidden intentions. Her presence eased something inside my chest that had been tight for weeks. "We'll set up a wellness check schedule," she said, "but one where you call us. That way, you decide when people come inside your home." Choice. Such a simple word, but lately it felt like a revolution. While she worked, I glanced through the window and spotted a car idling down the road. A dark sedan. My breath hitched. The windows were tinted. I couldn't see who was inside. My hand tightened around the table edge. Tessa followed my gaze. "Do you know them?" "No," I said quietly. Her posture shifted. She noted the plate number discreetly. "I'll run that later. You're safe here. And we'll make sure you stay safe." When she left, the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the living room. I walked down to the beach alone, letting the wind push against me. The waves pounded like a heartbeat, relentless and free. I knelt and let the cold water wash over my fingers. This place wasn't just Victor's last gift. It was a reminder that the world was still wide, that I still had a right to take space in it. As I climbed the steps back up, I saw a figure walking along the road toward the house. He looked out of place against the serene landscape. A man in a dark jacket, head turning sharply back and forth as though searching for someone. I ducked behind a dune, watching silently until he continued past without noticing me. Paranoia or danger? In these circumstances, the difference barely mattered. When I returned to the house, my phone had 3 missed calls from Daniel. I stared at the screen until I could no longer see the letters clearly. He wrote one message. "Mom, please. Just tell me where you are. I'm worried." Worried because his plan was falling apart. Worried because I was no longer a pawn in their game. I pressed the power button, shutting the phone off completely. Not today. That evening, after Martin left and darkness tucked itself around the roof, I lit a single lamp beside the window. I placed the defense ledger open on the table and added a new entry. Suspicious vehicle sighting at 3:42 p.m. Unknown male near property. My handwriting looked different now, firmer, as though I trusted each stroke. The house creaked in the cool night air. With each sound, I reminded myself that I was no longer their captive. I was a witness to their crimes, and I was building a case they could not outrun. Before bed, I stood again on the porch. Below, the ocean glowed silver under the moon. I inhaled deeply, letting the salt fill every corner of my lungs. Freedom didn't feel loud or triumphant. It felt like standing alone in the dark and knowing that no one could take away the air in your chest. Inside, the radio sat on the nightstand. Before turning off the light, I pressed play on Victor's recording one more time. "You are stronger than you think." I lay down, pulling the blanket over my shoulders. A soft calm drifted through me. For the first time since that night behind the door, I slept without fear. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, maybe even confrontation. But tonight, the ocean kept watch, and I was exactly where I needed to be. Morning light spilled across the hardwood floors like a gentle invitation to start again. I stood barefoot in the kitchen of Gull's Haven, looking out at the ocean while the kettle hissed on the stove. For the first time in months, I poured myself a cup of tea that I made. My own hands, my own choice. No suspicious smiles watching. I held the warm mug and realized how empowering such a simple act could be. I took the defense ledger from the counter and opened to yesterday's entry. Fresh ink glistened beside a new page. Today needed to show progress, not fear. I wrote the date and then underlined it. A soft knock at the front door startled me. I walked slowly, peeking through the peephole before opening. Tessa stood there, smiling the kind of smile that didn't ask anything from me. "I brought some supplies," she said, holding a folder and a new phone still in its box. "This one isn't linked to your old accounts. Only the people you trust will have the number." She set everything down and looked around the house again, admiring its quiet resilience. "How did you sleep?" I nodded. "Better than I have in a long time." We sat at the table together. Tessa explained how I could safely record interactions without alerting anyone. She showed me how to scan pages of the ledger and store them offline, then on a protected drive locked with my fingerprint. Everything she said was practical, empowering, and rooted in the belief that I deserved autonomy. As she spoke, I realized how many people had already joined my quiet fight. None of them asked me to give up who I was. They asked me to stand firmer in it. While we worked, the old landline phone in the kitchen rang sharply. I jumped. Tessa placed a hand on mine, steadying it. "You don't have to answer," she whispered. But I needed to know. I slowly picked up the receiver. "Hello? Grace?" Daniel's voice cracked through the line. "Where are you? Why are you doing this? Please, just come home." I swallowed a dozen responses and gave only the safest one. "I'm fine, Daniel." "You don't sound fine," he insisted. There was panic music in the background. Keys jangling, doors slamming. He was searching. "We need to talk. Sloan thinks you're confused." Confused. The word curled like a fist. I let a slow breath pass through my lips. "We will talk when the time is right, but I will not sign anything, and I will not come home because you demand it." He stammered. "I love you," I said, cutting gently through his excuses. But I'm not returning to that house. His breathing grew uneven. Is someone making you say that? No, I answered firmly. I am making me say that. Before he could respond, I hung up. My heart shook as though I'd slammed a door inside my chest. Tessa squeezed my shoulder. I nodded to assure her I was okay. She and I spent the next hour gathering every protection for what was coming next. She walked me through neighborhood safety measures, neighbors who could watch discreetly, the emergency contact network she was activating. Then she glanced around the living room, noticed the small antique radio by the window. It gives you comfort, she said. It reminds me that I am not alone, I replied. When she left, I cracked open a window to let the ocean breeze sweep in. The waves felt louder today. Companions, not threats. The afternoon passed quietly until my phone, my new phone, buzzed. A message from Linda at the bank appeared. Affidavit notarized and sent to your attorney. Call if you need anything. I sent her a small thank you. Kindness, even typed, can hold a person up. Only a few minutes later, another message came through. Unknown number. And yet I knew exactly who had sent it by the tone. You're scaring everyone. We need to resolve this. You don't have much time, Grace. Sloane's words always pretended to be care, but her intentions bled through like ink in water. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the ledger and wrote the message down word for word. As I finished, the crunch of tires on gravel snapped my attention to the window. A car slid into view. The same dark sedan from yesterday. This time it parked closer, directly across the road. My breath caught in my throat. A man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders. He scanned the house like he measured every exit, every blind spot. Then he raised a phone to his ear while staring directly at the living room window. I stepped back into the shadow of the wall. My pulse thumped loud enough I feared he could hear it through the glass. The phone rang inside the house again. I didn't move. Neither did he. Then the ringing stopped. He lowered his phone. A moment later, the car engine revved and the vehicle backed away slowly, disappearing around the bend. I stood frozen, counting heartbeats until the adrenaline settled. Then I wrote another line in the ledger. Same vehicle, same individual, surveillance escalating. Evening crept in like a weary guest. The house clicked and sighed as the wind rose. I warmed a bowl of soup and carried it to the window seat overlooking the ocean. With each spoonful, I reminded myself, I belonged to myself. They would not take that from me again. I remembered a conversation from years ago, Daniel sitting on the porch swing, asking if the ocean ever got tired of hitting the shore. I laughed then. Waves don't break because they're weak, I told him. They break because they are relentless. Tonight, those words echoed back to me. A promise, a warning, a truth. Later, I took the radio from the shelf and placed it beside my pillow. I pressed play. Victor's voice filled the room. Stand your ground, Gracie. You've spent your life protecting others. Let this be the moment you protect yourself. I closed my eyes as tears slipped silently toward my ears. They weren't tears of fear, not anymore. They were tears of defiance, tears of a woman reclaiming her own narrative. I lay still, listening as the ocean roared beneath the house. Not a roar of danger, but of power. Tomorrow, the next move would be mine. And soon, they would learn that the quiet ones are the hardest to break. I woke to the drum of rain against the windows and the faraway roar of wind off the ocean. The sky outside looked like steel pulled tight across the horizon. A storm was coming, not just in the weather, but in everything circling my life now. I dressed quickly and went downstairs, keeping the defense ledger close to me as though it were a shield. While making breakfast, I jumped at a sudden knock on the door. My heart hammered until I recognized the voice calling my name. "It's Martin!" Relief loosened my grip on the counter. I unlocked the door and let him in, the gust behind him scattering raindrops across the floor. "We need to talk," he said, setting his briefcase on the kitchen table. "Your son and his wife filed a wellness check request last night. They claimed you were in danger and possibly being manipulated." I swallowed hard. "They're trying to use the system against me." Martin nodded. "Fortunately, your voluntary declaration with the police is already in the system. Sergeant Brooks intercepted the call. That's the only reason officers aren't at your door right now." The idea that they tried to send law enforcement to find me made my skin crawl. I wasn't a missing person. I wasn't unwell. I was the one being hunted. Martin took a seat and opened his briefcase. "We need to strengthen the record even more. Today, we file protective motions and a formal notice against attempts to interfere in your health care." I sat across from him, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold. "A fight like this isn't won in one move," he continued. "It's won by stacking truth higher than lies." He handed me a document to sign. "This warns the court of manipulative attempts regarding your medical autonomy. It puts authorities on alert." I signed without hesitation. Before he finished packing up, the doorbell rang again. But this time, no friendly voice followed. Martin's eyes cut toward me. "Do not open unless you know who it is." I moved silently to the window. A woman stood on the porch, clutching a binder with a bright logo on the front. Sunridge Assisted Living. My pulse stumbled. She knocked again, louder. "Mrs. Whitaker? We're here to take you to your appointment. You're due for a facility intake this morning." Facility. Intake. Words sharp enough to bruise. Martin stepped behind me and spoke through the door. "We are in contact with local authorities. Leave the property immediately or officers will be called." A hesitation, then hurried footsteps backing away. I watched her rush to a car and speed off through the rain. I added the incident to the defense ledger. Uninvited intake attempt. Sunridge, binder in hand, pushed for relocation. Martin placed a hand on the table. "They're desperate now. That makes them unpredictable." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A voicemail left without a ring. I pressed play, holding the speaker tentatively. Daniel's voice filled the room, strained and ragged. "Mom, please answer. I'm coming to get you. I can't let you disappear like this. We need you to be where you're safe. Sloan says you're being reckless." Reckless, because I refuse to be controlled. Another message arrived seconds later. Sloan's voice, tight with irritation disguised as concern. "Grace, this is going too far. You are not well. We are trying to help. Do not make us take legal actions you will regret." The falseness in her voice was thick as fog. I set the phone aside and wrote down the time of both messages. Evidence. Everything was evidence. Martin stood to leave. "Stay cautious. I'll be in court this afternoon to file the motions. Naomi is checking on something for me. You'll hear from me when we have the next step." After he left, silence spread across the house like a blanket. I tried to settle into a routine, tidying, reorganizing the cupboard, writing in the ledger, but unease kept pressing against my ribs. Mid-afternoon, a different knock came. Slow, angry. My stomach turned to stone. I stayed still, hidden behind the doorway dividing the kitchen from the living room. I heard a man's voice through the door, familiar enough to make my knees weaken. "Mom, it's me, Daniel." Rain dripped from his jacket as I opened the door only halfway. His eyes searched mine desperately. You can't just vanish, he said, voice cracking. Sloan filed paperwork. They're saying you're not safe. They're saying you need help before something terrible happens. My heart clenched. Something terrible almost did happen, I replied quietly. He shook his head. You're imagining things. You're making this harder than it needs to be. His gaze flicked inside, scanning for signs of disorder. Sloan is outside in the car. She just wants to talk. I stepped firmly into the doorway, blocking his view. No. He recoiled slightly, not expecting resistance. Mom, please. You can't trust strangers. We are your family. Family. The word tasted like a lie spoken with trembling lips. I'm safe here, I said, and I choose my own company now. His shoulders sagged, rain soaking into his clothes. He looked lost, genuinely lost. And that broke something inside me even as it forged something stronger. She loves me too, he whispered. Sloan loves us both. She's just trying to fix what I messed up. Debt, fear, shame. Those were the real architects of this nightmare. If she loved you, I said, she would not make you sacrifice your own mother to save yourselves. His face pinched with pain. A boy again, caught doing wrong and wishing someone else could undo it. I need to think, he said quietly. I know you do, I answered. He reached as if to hug me, but then dropped his arms halfway, as if the weight of his choices held them down. He turned, walked back to the car. Through the window, I saw Sloan gripping the steering wheel, her expression cold, calculating. Daniel murmured something to her. Her jaw clenched. The car lurched into reverse and sped away. I locked the door, leaning against it as my breath trembled out. I didn't cry. I had gone beyond the point where tears provided relief. Instead, I wrote one line in the ledger. Attempt to retrieve and persuade. Daniel conflicted. Sloan angry. That evening, as the storm ravaged the coastline, a call came from Martin. His tone was triumphant, steady. Your voluntary proof of well-being is filed. So is the protective motion. We're ready to counter every move they make. Relief flooded me like warm light pushing out cold shadow, but the storm outside reminded me this battle was far from over. I ended the call and walked to the picture window. The ocean thrashed against the rocks, relentless and powerful. They thought they could retreat and regroup. They did not understand. So could I. Tomorrow, I would be even stronger. Quiet doesn't mean defeated. Quiet is the deep breath before the next wave hits. I woke the next morning to a calmer sky, the storm having spent itself through the night. The ocean was still restless, but the air felt clearer, sharper, like a mind freshly made up. Today was about truth, not whispered behind doors or buried under paperwork, but truth spoken plainly where it could no longer be twisted. Martin arrived just before noon, his car tires crunching over the damp gravel. He stepped inside with a confidence that had become a source of strength for me. It's time, he said simply. I nodded, gripping the defense ledger in one hand and the small radio in the other, like talismans guiding me forward. He drove us into town with no radio on, only silence broken by waves crashing against cliffs in the distance. As we parked outside a brick building with government seals etched into the glass doors, he turned toward me. The psychiatrist is here, independent, court approved. She will evaluate you thoroughly. We need this for the record. I'm ready, I said, though nervousness fluttered beneath my ribs. Inside, the waiting room was bright with soft chairs and careful plants arranged to look comforting. A woman in her early 60s approached, wearing a calm expression and a name badge, clipped neatly to her jacket. "Mrs. Whitaker? I'm Dr. Evelyn Park," she said. Her voice was steady, not patronizing. She didn't look at me like a problem to solve. She looked at me like a person. We entered a private room with a window facing a small garden. Dr. Park closed the door gently and sat across from me, legs crossed, a notepad balanced on her knee. "I read the preliminary information," she said, "but I want to hear everything from you directly. In your own words. Start wherever you'd like." For a moment, I stared at the space between us, the space where lies had lived for weeks. Then I began. The overheard conversation behind my door, the bitter taste of tampered tea, the forged bank forms, the rearranged house and disappearing books, the attempts to rush me into guardianship. As I talked, Dr. Park's pen moved slowly, thoughtfully. She asked precise questions, dates, names, how each action made me feel, whether I ever lost track of myself. "I have been frightened," I admitted, "but not confused. I know exactly what they're trying to do." She leaned forward, her eyes kind yet discerning. "You are articulate, oriented, and entirely aware of your circumstances. Nothing about you suggests cognitive decline." Something loosened inside my chest at those words, like a rope that had been pulling tight for too long finally let go. The evaluation continued for 3 hours. Cognitive tests, memory tasks, emotional reasoning. I passed each one with quiet determination, fueled by every moment someone tried to steal my voice. When we finished, Dr. Park stood and offered her hand. "You are of completely sound mind," she said firmly, "and you have been the target of coercion. I will put that in my report." I nearly cried. Instead, I squeezed her hand and said, "Thank you for seeing me." Outside in the hallway, Ruth appeared, my old friend with the warm laugh, though I hadn't heard it lately. "I told Martin I'd be here," she said, pulling me into an embrace that smelled faintly of lavender and home. No one should have to walk into rooms like these alone. We left the building together, stepping into afternoon sunlight. Ruth drove us back to Gull's Haven while Martin followed behind. She glanced at me from the driver's seat. "You know, I've always admired your quiet strength. I just never knew how much of it you were carrying." I touched her arm gently. "Thank you for not believing the lies." She snorted. "I've known you half my life, Grace. If anyone tried to convince me you were losing your mind, I'd tell them to check theirs first." Her loyalty was a balm I hadn't realized I needed so badly. When we reached the house, I noticed a small envelope taped near the mailbox. My heart skipped. I peeled it off carefully and stepped inside before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed, cold. "We won't let this continue. You need intervention. Stop making this difficult." No signature, no subtlety, and no attempt left to pretend this was kindness. I showed the note to Martin, and he photographed it immediately. "This reinforces our case," he said. "Every intimidation tactic, every attempt to pressure you, it's all evidence." He stepped aside to take a call, and I walked onto the porch alone. The wind whipped at my hair and tugged at the corners of the note, but I held tight. Below, waves battered the rocks with relentless power. I breathed deep. Ruth helped me inside and made tea, the safe kind. She placed a hand on mine. "You know this ends with them getting what they deserve, right?" "It has to," I whispered. "Not just for me, for anyone they could hurt next." As twilight softened the sky, Martin returned inside with renewed urgency. "Good news," he said. "We have a key piece of corroboration." He placed a printed transcript on the coffee table. "Brent Klein, The private investigator they hired. He recorded a phone call with Sloan discussing certain chemical adjustments to your daily routine. I stared at the words written out so plainly. Once she's groggy enough, her signature is just a formality. My breath caught. Rage trembled low and deep like the ocean under storm clouds. I looked up at Martin. She was willing to drug me into submission. She was willing to erase you, he corrected softly. I nodded. No tears. Just a quiet fire spreading through my veins. We gathered everything. The affidavit from Linda, the photos Miguel took, the messages from Daniel and Sloan, the report Dr. Park would finalize tonight. And now Brent's recording. Piece by piece, a truth taller than any lie was rising. Ruth set a string of pearls on the table beside the documents. Wear these to court, she said. A reminder that dignity doesn't disappear because someone tries to bury it. I touched the pearls lightly. Their smooth surface reminded me of who I was long before manipulation took root. That night, I added a single line to the defense ledger. I am seen. I am heard. I am believed. Then I stood by the window, watching the moon cast silver light over the water. The radio rested nearby, but tonight I didn't press play. I didn't need Victor's voice to steady me. I already felt him in every wave that refused to break quietly. Tomorrow, the world would see what I had built. They wanted to force me into silence. Instead, silence sharpened me. Silence taught me how to fight. And now, I was ready to speak. The following day arrived with the kind of heavy calm that comes before lightning strikes. I stood in the living room of Gull's Haven, facing the door that looked out over the ocean. The air tasted like salt and inevitability. Martin called early, his voice crisp. Your daughter-in-law is coming today, he said. She filed a follow-up claim last night. She thinks she's cornered you. Let her believe that. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. I could already picture her car snaking down the gravel drive, tires grinding like teeth. I pressed my palm to the defense ledger, lying open on the table with every detail of their scheme captured in my own handwriting. A knock landed on the front door. 3 hard blows that rattled through the walls. There she was. I walked to the window and saw Daniel beside her in the passenger seat, his face pale, his hands twisting nervously. Sloan stood outside with her arms crossed, posture tight, chin raised like a general ready to claim land that didn't belong to her. I let a few seconds pass, long enough to feel my heart slow to a steady beat. Then I opened the door. Grace, she said with a smile stretched too thin to be anything but a mask. We need to talk. I don't think so, I replied, voice calm as the tide pulling back. She pushed one step forward. This has gone far enough. You are acting irrationally. You need help. Behind her, Daniel climbed out of the car. His eyes flickered to mine, full of apologies he wasn't brave enough to say out loud. Water beaded on his jacket from the fog rolling in off the sea. He looked small and lost against the backdrop of the crashing waves. Sloan continued, voice sharpening. We've spoken to professionals. You're not safe by yourself. We would never forgive ourselves if something happened to you out here. Concern as a weapon. I recognized the edge of manipulation by now. I stepped fully into the doorway, blocking her from seeing inside. I am perfectly safe and perfectly capable, she scoffed. You're alone in a run-down beach shack, hiding from reality. That is not capability. It's instability. Her words didn't pierce me. Instead, I cataloged them with chilling clarity. You're scared, I said quietly. You know everything you tried to build is falling apart. Color rose in her cheeks, anger seeping through her polished exterior. We are done being patient, she snapped. Either you come with us now, or we will petition the court today. I almost smiled, because she had no idea what awaited her. Behind me, a voice spoke firmly from the shadows of the porch. She isn't alone anymore. Sergeant Naomi Brooks stepped forward, her police badge glinting against her jacket. Her presence hit the air like a gavel. Sloane froze. Naomi planted herself between us, feet steady on the wooden boards. This property is under voluntary protection, she said. Mrs. Whitaker has declared independence and is legally recognized as fully competent. Any attempt to force movement or sign legal documents will be considered coercion. Sloane blinked rapidly, her composure fraying. Coercion? We're her family. That's what makes it worse, Naomi replied. Daniel looked between us, confusion and shame rippling across his face. Sloane, he whispered, tugging at her sleeve. Maybe we should go. No, Sloane hissed, jerking away. Not when we're this close. She pointed at me, her voice slicing through the mist. You think you can run from responsibility? You think you can twist this? I stepped closer, leveling my eyes with hers. I'm not twisting anything. I'm finally telling the truth. Her lips parted, ready to spit another order, when footsteps sounded behind her. A man approached from a dark car parked down the drive. Brent Klein, the private investigator she hired. He held his phone, screen bright with a recording queued up. His eyes met mine, softening with a hint of regret. I thought you should have this, he said, voice low. He pressed play. Sloane's voice filled the air, unmistakable, venomous. Once she's groggy enough, her signature is just a formality. The words struck harder in the open air than they ever had on paper. Daniel's knees buckled as though the ground had given way. He stared at his wife, horror turning his features gray. You were going to drug her? He choked. Sloane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her lies dried up. Her plans shattered under the weight of her own voice. Naomi crossed her arms. This recording has already been submitted as evidence. Mrs. Whitaker is now protected under active investigation. Sloane turned toward Daniel, desperate. I did this for us, for our future. Daniel backed away, hands trembling like leaves in the wind. You were willing to destroy my mother for that. His voice cracked. What does that make us? Sloane searched for control, but there was none left for her to grab. She stumbled backward toward the car, face hollowing as Naomi stepped closer. This isn't over, she whispered to me. Yes, I said softly. It is. She climbed inside the car and slammed the door. Daniel stood frozen for one more moment, trying to find words. But guilt was a weight he could no longer carry and speak under. He turned away and followed her, the car pulling out sharply, disappearing into the fog like a bad dream losing shape. I exhaled slowly, each breath releasing weeks of held fear. Naomi gave me a small nod, solid and reassuring. Brent lingered for a moment, regret shadowing his eyes. If you ever need help again, he said, I'm one call away. Then he left, shoes crunching over gravel until the sound disappeared too. I watched the ocean rise and fall below the bluff, endless and unbroken. My hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from victory. A quiet victory, earned one small truth at a time. Inside, I opened the defense ledger and wrote, Attempted forced intervention failed. Independent support confirmed. Daniel wavering. Sloane collapsing. The wind howled like applause against the windows. Tomorrow, I would face them in court. Tomorrow, the tide would turn for good. The courthouse in Monmouth was a sturdy brick building that looked like it had weathered a century of storms without losing its spine. As I stood before it, I felt a quiet kinship. We had both been underestimated. We both knew how to endure. Martin walked beside me, carrying a neat portfolio of documents, the banking affidavit, the photo of the suspicious medication, the printed transcript of Sloane's cruel planning, the note from Sunridge, and most importantly, Dr. Park's evaluation. His confidence was a cloak draped over my shoulders. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and polished floors. People hurried by with files pressed to their chests, conversations clipped and purposeful. We were shown to a small courtroom, its wooden benches polished to a dull shine. The walls held that heavy silence unique to places where truth battles lies. I sat down, clutching the defense ledger in my lap like a lifeline. Daniel and Sloane entered moments later. Her heels struck the floor with the precision of someone who believed every step still belonged to her. His eyes never rose from the ground. He looked like a man trying not to drown in his own conscience. Sergeant Naomi Brooks arrived, nodding politely to the judge. Dr. Evelyn Park took a seat behind us with calm authority radiating from her posture. Brent lingered near the back, his presence a reminder that even those paid to serve lies sometimes choose truth instead. Judge Miriam Cole entered, her gavel tapping the wood once. She looked stern but fair, the kind of woman who measured decisions not in emotion, but in evidence. Case of Whitaker versus Whitaker, she announced. Petition for guardianship of Grace Whitaker, submitted by Daniel and Sloane Whitaker. She turned her gaze toward me. Mrs. Whitaker, do you consent to this petition? I rose slowly, meeting her eyes with all the steadiness I had reclaimed. I do not. I am here of my own free will to show that I am fully capable of managing my life. Very well, Mr. Reyes, the judge prompted. Martin stood with deliberate calm. Your Honor, we move not only to deny this petition, but to file a counterclaim indicating attempts of elder exploitation and coercive control. I watched Judge Cole absorb those words. Her brows knit briefly, then smoothed. Proceed. Sloane sprang to her feet as though spring-loaded. This is outrageous. She has been erratic, paranoid, hiding from her own family. Judge Cole raised a hand. Sit until you are recognized. The command hit the air like a slap. Sloane slowly lowered herself, cheeks flushed with anger. Martin motioned for his first witness. Dr. Park. Dr. Evelyn Park stepped forward with the poise of someone who knew her truth would not be shaken. She described my evaluation. Clear cognition, full orientation, no sign of impairment. She spoke about patterns of manipulation often mistaken for concern. She used terms that felt clinical but validating. Financial exploitation, medical coercion, psychological isolation. Each sentence dismantled Sloane's narrative brick by brick. Daniel fidgeted, chewing at his lip until it turned red. Next, Naomi testified. She detailed the voluntary declaration I had filed, her attempts to block coercive wellness check requests, and the delivered documents suggesting relocation without consent. Her voice remained steady, authoritative, a shield no one could break. Linda's affidavit was read next, outlining the suspicious bank changes. Miguel's photo was submitted, time-stamped and precise. And then Brent's recorded phone call. The courtroom filled with Sloane's voice. Once she's groggy enough, her signature is just a formality. The words echoed across the chambers like poison exposed to daylight. Daniel's shoulders shook. Sloane's mouth tightened into a thin, terrified line. Judge Cole stared straight at them. Is this your voice, Mrs. Whitaker? Sloane hesitated. I was taken out of context. I felt Martin's hand rest on my arm as he stood again. Your Honor, I would like to submit one final piece of evidence into the record. He motioned for me. I walked to the witness stand with the defense ledger held to my chest. When the bailiff swore me in, my voice did not tremble. I placed the ledger on the stand, opening to the first page. This is a written record of everything that has happened to me since the night I overheard my family making plans about my life without me. Page by page, I explained. The tea, the forged forms, the house alterations, the pressure to sign legal documents, the threats disguised as worry, the phone calls, the visits, the lies. I pulled out the small, worn piece of paper from Daniel's childhood, the little certificate with a gold star he once earned for kindness. I held it up for the courtroom to see. This boy, I said softly, loved me, and I love him still. I turned my eyes toward him. Tears streamed silently down his cheeks. But love does not excuse harm. You do not get to erase someone and call it protection. Silence thickened the air. Even the judge paused to absorb the weight of the moment. When I finished, Martin gathered the ledger and returned it to me gently. I stepped down, leaving a piece of my fear behind on the stand. Judge Cole folded her hands. I have seen enough. Sloane jerked upright, her voice splitting with panic. We only wanted what was best. Judge Cole's gavel struck once, sharp and final. Sloane Whitaker, you have attempted to facilitate involuntary medical manipulation, financial fraud, and coercive control of a legally competent adult. This court denies your petition for guardianship, orders a restraining measure for the protection of Mrs. Whitaker, and refers your actions for criminal investigation. Sloane gasped, as though justice itself stole her breath. Judge Cole turned to Daniel. As for you, Mr. Whitaker, you may avoid charges if you cooperate fully moving forward. You will be required to undergo counseling, financial restitution, and remain under strict contact conditions with your mother. She decides when and how that contact occurs. Daniel could only nod through his tears. Judge Cole looked at me last. Her voice softened. Mrs. Whitaker, your independence and dignity are protected by this court. The gavel fell one final time. In the stillness that followed, my heart lifted for the first time in a long while. The silence here didn't feel like a trap. It felt like relief. The storm had turned, and this time, the wave was mine. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled of polished wood and old history. People passed with briefcases and purposeful strides, but to me, everything slowed. For weeks, I had lived in fear of being silenced. Now, there was space inside my lungs that hadn't been there before. I inhaled, feeling every inch of that victory settle beneath my ribs. Martin guided me to a long bench near the windows. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warming my shoulders. You did beautifully, he said. You spoke with clarity and courage. That matters. I spoke because I had to, I replied. Silence almost cost me everything. He nodded, understanding. Justice isn't loud. It's persistent. Before he could say more, I saw Daniel standing a few feet away. He hovered near the corner like someone afraid to step into a room where the truth still lingered. His shoulders were rounded inward, his hands shaking slightly. His eyes, red and exhausted, searched for mine. Martin squeezed my arm. Take your time, he said before stepping aside. Daniel approached slowly. When he stopped in front of me, he looked like a little boy again. The boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had nightmares. But he wasn't climbing into my safety now. He was standing in the wreckage of his own decisions. "Mom," his voice cracked, then broke entirely. He lowered himself onto the bench beside me, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I'm sorry." 2 words heavy enough to lift or crush a heart. "I let fear decide for me," he continued. "I was drowning in debt. Marcus kept calling, threatening. Sloane said this was the only way." He swallowed hard. I believed her because believing her was easier than facing how badly I'd failed. I listened. The ocean wasn't in the room, but I could hear it anyway. Every wave a reminder that the world keeps moving even when hearts break. "I thought we were protecting you," he whispered. "But we were trying to put you in a cage." He finally looked up, tears on his lashes. "You deserve better. You always have." I reached into my purse and pulled out the little paper certificate, the one with the gold star sticker he earned for kindness so many years ago. I placed it carefully in his hands. His fingers shook as he held that fragment of a purer version of himself. "You are still the boy who earned that," I said gently, "but you need to choose him again." He closed his eyes as a sob escaped him. He didn't try to hide it this time. He didn't try to explain himself. He simply let the truth hurt, the way it had hurt me. "I will make this right," he said through tears. "Whatever it takes. I will pay back every dollar I owe. I will help with the investigation. I will do anything you ask. Just don't give up on me." I placed my hand over his, feeling the tremor beneath his skin. "I won't give up on you," I said. "But I won't let you near me until I see that change with my own eyes. I need time. And you need work." He nodded, accepting the boundary like it was a sentence and a gift. "I'll earn it," he whispered. "I will earn you back." Sloane appeared then, escorted by 2 officers. She looked stripped of confidence, her face pale beneath the wash of fluorescent lights. As she passed, she glared at me through venom-laced tears. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she spat. "No," I answered quietly. "It wasn't." Her expression twisted with defiance that could no longer save her. She was led away, heels clicking a final hollow rhythm. Daniel stood and wiped his eyes. "I'll go," he said softly. "I'll be in touch when I have something good to show you." I nodded, and he turned toward the exit, carrying the gold star with him, the first honest weight of accountability he had ever held. After he disappeared into the flow of people, Ruth arrived from the courtroom, her smile warm enough to push back the lingering chill. "You okay?" she asked, and "I will be," I said. Martin rejoined us with papers in hand. "One more signature," he said with a small smile, "and then you're free to go home. To your real home." Home. A word that no longer meant the past. A word that pointed toward the ocean. We finished the final steps, legal protection wrapping around me like armor. When we left the courthouse, the sky had opened into soft blue. The kind of blue that breathes possibility. The drive back to Gull's Haven felt lighter. When we arrived, Martin promised updates soon and headed out. Ruth stayed a while, fussing with the windows until the house felt warm and lived in again. As evening settled, I stepped outside alone. The ocean spread out before me, tides rolling in like applause. I took off my shoes and walked down the worn path to the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet. The wind carried a spark of salt that stung my eyes in a way that felt like cleansing, not pain. I sat on a smooth rock near the shoreline and watched the sun lower itself into the horizon. Waves rushed and curled around my ankles, pulling away and returning again, like breath. So much had been stripped from me, But more had been reclaimed: dignity, choice, control, quiet justice. When the last rim of sunlight dipped below the line, where water meets sky, I whispered into the twilight, "I'm still here." The ocean answered with a crash, steady and strong. Not every victory is loud. Some are whispered into the wind. Tomorrow, I would carry all of this into the next step of my healing. But tonight, I simply rested in the truth. I survived, and I would go on living. Morning sunlight crept into my room softly, as if careful not to wake old pain. For once, I didn't dread the day. Justice had begun its work, and I could finally turn my attention towards something I hadn't dared hope for in weeks: healing. I brewed my own coffee, the scent filling the kitchen of Gull's Haven. I watched the steam rise from the mug, a small reminder that warmth could come from within, not from anyone's permission. Outside the window, seagulls circled lazily above the surf, crying like laughter carried by wind. My phone buzzed with a message from Martin. Protective order signed. Investigation opened. Sloan will face charges. Daniel cooperating. Take today to breathe. I set the phone down with a long exhale. Breathe. A simple instruction that felt like a luxury I had forgotten. As I stepped onto the porch, I noticed a figure by the driveway. Brent leaned against his car, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain whether he should knock. "Are you here on business?" I asked, bold, descending the steps. He shook his head. "I'm here to tell you I quit." His voice held something solid, like a door finally shut. "I won't work for people like them ever again." He glanced toward the ocean before continuing. "I wanted to apologize. I should have seen it sooner. But when I heard that recording, something inside me snapped into place." I studied him for a moment. It's never too late to choose the right side. His shoulders eased. "If you ever need anything else, protection, surveillance, someone to talk to, I'm around." He handed me a card without the logo of his old employer, a personal number, a fresh start for him too. "Thank you, Brent," I said, and he left with a nod, the roar of his engine fading behind the sound of waves. Later, Ruth arrived with groceries cradled in her arms and laughter ready on her tongue. "This house needs more life," she declared, marching into the kitchen like a general armed with kindness. We cooked together, fresh bread warming in the oven, tomato soup bubbling on the stovetop, familiar scents, comfort reclaimed. "You know," she said while slicing carrots, "people think retaliation means yelling or fighting. But what you did," she tapped the edge of my defense ledger resting on the counter, "you wrote the truth. You walked into court with dignity. That's a kind of confrontation only the brave can manage." I blinked back unexpected tears. "I wasn't brave," I whispered. "I was terrified." "Being brave doesn't mean you weren't scared," she replied. "It means you chose yourself anyway." Her words wrapped around a wound that had long been left exposed. We ate by the window, listening to the steady hymn of the sea. Afterward, she kissed my cheek and promised to return tomorrow. When she left, the house settled again into quiet, but not the lonely kind. This was the kind that let my thoughts finally rest. As I tidied up the kitchen, another message arrived. This one from Daniel. "I'm in a program to deal with the debt. They'll let me pay it back over time. I gave the police everything I had on Sloan. I'm trying, Mom." I read it twice. Then I wrote a short reply. "Keep going. No promises. Not yet. But hope" allowed a gentle seat in my heart again. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the property. The path curved along the cliff, overlooking endless blue water. I paused when I reached the little shed near the back of the house. Something glinted beneath a loose floorboard. With a careful tug, I revealed a small metal box. The initials VH were engraved on the lid. My breath caught. I opened it slowly. Inside lay a single cassette tape labeled in Victor's handwriting. Final note. Beneath it, a folded sheet of paper. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. Gracie, if you find this, it means you kept fighting. Thank you for believing in yourself. My greatest comfort was knowing you would not let the world shrink you. Live boldly, sister. Your story isn't ending. It's beginning again. I pressed the letter to my heart, tears slipping free. Victor had left breadcrumbs everywhere, leading me not just to safety, but to myself. Back inside, I placed the tape into the antique radio. The machine clicked and hummed. Then his voice filled the room, stronger, clearer than ever before. Grace, he said, with warmth and pride that wrapped around me like a blanket. If they ever make you doubt yourself, remember who you are. You are the storm they never saw coming. A shaky laugh escaped my lips. My brother wasn't just protecting me. He was cheering for me. Evening rose slow and golden. I set the pearls Ruth gave me on my dresser, symbols of dignity restored. I opened the defense ledger once more, and at the bottom of the final page I wrote, Justice holds, healing begins. I took the key marked VH from my pocket and held it in my palm. It was cold, but full of meaning, like a door I could finally open. Outside, the ocean glimmered under a soft moon. I stepped onto the porch and wrapped a shawl around my shoulders. The night air tasted clean, liberating. Somewhere inside me a new rhythm formed. Not fear, not survival, renewal. The world hadn't shrunk me. I had expanded. And tomorrow I would wake again, still standing, stronger than the tide that tried to take me. I woke before sunrise. The sound of waves my quiet companion. The bedroom curtains fluttered as the ocean breeze slipped in, cool and alive. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. Hands that had once trembled under pressure, now steady with purpose. Today, there would be no courtroom, no signatures to defend my existence. Today belonged to me. I padded into the kitchen wearing my softest sweater, the one Daniel gave me years ago for Christmas, a reminder that love had lived here once. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, watching it fill the carafe like a slow sunrise in glass. The aroma drifted through the house, anchoring me in a sense of home I had been denied for too long. My phone vibrated on the counter. A new message from Daniel. Mom, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm working for it. I hope one day you'll let me show you the man I'm trying to become. Dad always said you were the strongest person he ever knew. Now I understand why. I pressed a hand to my heart. It didn't heal everything, but it opened something that had been locked shut. I typed a simple reply. I want peace for you. Keep going. I set the phone aside, then reached for the radio. The antique dial turned beneath my fingertips with a familiar click. Victor's voice poured out, soft and steady. You did it, Grace. Just 4 words, but they wrapped around me like an embrace from the brother who refused to let me fall. I closed my eyes and smiled. Thank you, I whispered. On the counter sat an envelope addressed in my own handwriting, something I had written last night before bed. The ink was dry, the message deliberate. It was for Daniel, not to hand over now, but one day, when the time was right. I placed it in a small wooden box near the front door, a promise waiting to be earned. I turned to the dresser beside the window. The string of pearls that Ruth had given me lay in a gentle curve. I fastened them around my neck, not because I needed adornment, but because dignity deserved to be honored. The house felt warm and alive as I stepped outside, barefoot, the grass still dewy beneath my feet. I followed the familiar path down toward the beach, the old VH key snug in my palm. The horizon was a soft wash of pink and gold. The first birds called out, greeting a day with no fear stitched into its corners. When I reached the shoreline, I slipped off my sweater and shoes, letting the sand hug my toes. The water stretched out forever, strong, enduring, free. I walked forward until the waves lapped around my ankles, cold enough to make me gasp. Salt water soaked into the hem of my pants. Wind lifted my hair. I let the ocean embrace me exactly as I was. No roles forced on me, no voice silenced, no strength doubted. I opened my fist and looked at the VH key resting in my palm. Victor's initials, his shield, his unfaltering love. I lifted it to my heart. "My life is finally mine," I said, and the words tasted like truth. Slowly, I turned back toward the house on the bluff, my house, standing strong above crashing waves, a place built from legacy, protected by law, and warmed by the people who believed in me. Behind me, the ocean roared, not angry, but triumphant. Ahead of me, gravel crunched under steady steps. The world didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt wide. I climbed the hill path and reached the porch, pausing to soak in the morning sun. My future waited inside, pages unwritten, but finally in my hands. From this day forward, I would live quietly, calmly, fully, not hiding, not fighting, just living. As I stepped through my own front door, I whispered a final promise into the breeze. It's never too late to reclaim your freedom. I smiled, knowing the waves below would carry that truth to anyone who needed to hear it.